Hello, hope you're doing well. Today I just wanted to go through and kind of show what my process is on creating a time lapse in Photoshop. So I'm right here in Lightroom first off, and I have a series of photos selected. I have these photos of this butte down in southern Utah, and I am going to turn this into a time lapse. So I have, let's see, what do I got? I got 385 photos here. It's nothing crazy, it's kind of a time lapse of the sun coming up and hitting that butte and the clouds moving over that structure. So the first thing that we want to do is just make sure that we have all of our photos edited. So I've actually already gone through, just for the sake of time, and edited all of these photos. You'll notice that some of these at the beginning are a little dark, and I did that on purpose, but I went through and I added the same edit to all of these photos, and then I came up here to my settings tab and I hit this match total exposures on all of these photos. I make sure that all of those are selected, hit match total exposures, and then that will help to make sure that all of your photos are exposed evenly, and that way you won't have any, kind of jitteriness with the light throughout your time lapse. So have everything edited in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just I'm going to select this first one, and I'm going to come all the way to the end, and I'm going to hit shift and select the last one. So like I said, I kept this kind of dark on purpose. You don't have to do that, there are other ways to do that, but this is more so about how to actually process the time lapse in Photoshop rather than I guess how to make it look good. So I have everything selected here, and we're actually going to export these first. So when we're putting these into Photoshop, we need to put them in as JPEGs. So we can't put the raw files into Photoshop and do this with the raw files. We have to do this through the JPEGs. So we have to export all of these first, which does take a little bit of time. So we're gonna hit export, and we'll select a, let's see, we'll keep it on Capital Reef here, and we'll hit new folder, and we'll just do Butte time lapse. And we'll hit create, choose, and then we want to make sure that our file naming structure is set up in a way that Photoshop can read it in a, I guess, in chronological order. So what I always do is I come up to custom name and sequence. So that way I can type in, whatever I want. So we can do FB time lapse, and then it'll put a 1 after this. You always want to do custom name sequence. If you do custom name and you do the same name on all of them, it's going to have your first photo not have any kind of number attached to it, so it's not going to be in order. Basically, this is just a way to making sure that when Photoshop reads all your files, that it's actually reading that first file. Because normally, if you did this on custom name and you put in your own name, that first file, like I said, won't have any kind of a number system attached to it. So it'll throw it, when you put it through Photoshop, it'll throw it all the way to the very end of your sequence. So you want to have custom name and sequence, that way everything starts off with a number at the beginning. You have that example down there, FBTL-1, and then everything after this one, FBTL-1-2, so on and so forth. So hit export, and then we'll give that just a few minutes to do that. Again, there's 385 files, so it'll take a couple minutes. Okay, so we have all of our photos exported from Lightroom. So we're gonna come down to our Finder tab just to check those out. As you can see, we have our folder that we made here, and then we have all of our files all listed down in sequential order from 1 all the way to 385. So just how we want. Also, just to note, this is done on a Mac, and so I know that Windows doesn't have a Finder folder, but I mean, that's just the equivalent to that is just going into your files and finding the folder that you put all your files in. So now we're gonna go into Photoshop. So I'm gonna open my Photoshop app. We're gonna come up to File. We're gonna hit Open. Then we're going to navigate over to our photos that we just exported from Lightroom. Okay, so once we have those photos, what we're going to do here, this is important to note, but we're going to click just the first one, only the first photo, and then we're going to come down here to image sequence. And by clicking image sequence, we are by default in a way selecting all of the photos in this file. So by clicking that image sequence box, Photoshop is going to recognize that we want to put all of these images in sequential order into a timeline basically. So we're going to make sure our image sequence box is selected, make sure that first photo is selected, and we're going to hit open. And this will take, well, actually, let's pick our frame rate. We'll do this one in, let's see, we'll actually do 30 for this one. So we'll hit OK. And I typically pick my frame rate based on kind of how long I want the video to be. Most of my time lapses I just do in 24, just because most of the videos I do are in 24 frames a second. You also need to keep in mind that whatever your frames per second is going to determine how long your time lapse is going to be. So for example, we have 385 photos and we have a timeline that is set to 24 frames a second. We're going to be pushing through 24 of those frames per second. So if you want this to be a little bit of a slower timeline, or excuse me, a slower time lapse, which this is going to be, you want to set that at 24 frames a second. Obviously, you can speed it up in post. That's totally fine. I've done that before and it works totally fine. But if you do want it to be a little bit of a quicker time lapse, then you can set it to 60 frames a second or even 30, and then that'll just speed up, you know, how fast those files are moving through your timeline. So we have this set to 30 though for this one. So, okay, so we're all set up here in Photoshop. What I'm going to do, just so I can get a visual on what we're doing, is we want to come up to our window tab and we will hit timeline. Now what this is going to do is just show us down here at the bottom, essentially the full clip of what we have put together here. So, and you can, by hitting the space bar or even, you know, some of these functions down here on the bottom, you can play this and you can get an idea of what this looks like. It doesn't always play very well just because a lot of these photos have to be rendered individually. This is a very, very large file right here that this is set up, so it's very slow sometimes. And one thing that you can do to kind of combat that is you can come up here to image and you can go to canvas size. You can actually set this to whatever canvas you want. So this one we're going to set to a 4K resolution. So we're going to set this to 3840 wide and then 2160 pixels high. And then we'll hit OK. And then we'll hit proceed. This is just saying that the new canvas size will be smaller than the current one and clipping will occur, but this is totally fine. So hit proceed. Okay, so obviously this is cropped in a lot. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to, obviously, when we set those parameters down to that 4K resolution, it just cropped in really tight. So now we just need to fix the crop on our photo. So all the info's still there, it's just outside of the bounds of those parameters that we set. So to combat this, I'm gonna make sure we're zoomed out just so that we can get a good view of everything. And then I'm going to hit Command T, and now you can see the actual parameters from our original photo. So we're gonna crop this in, not quite like that. We'll go just like that, just making sure we're fitting into that canvas. So then we'll hit enter, and there we go. So that is a smaller file now. So now it should have a little bit of an easier time playing through the timeline here at the bottom. So we'll just hit space. And as you can see, it's very slowly playing. It's not going to play very quick while we're in Photoshop. Obviously, once you export it, it'll play a lot quicker. So I usually don't bother to. Yeah, you can see at the bottom it's running at a frame rate of 1.97. So it's not moving very fast. So we're just going to pause that, not worry about it. Okay, now what we're going to do is just export. Before we export, though, I do want to note you can make adjustments to your video file here. In that case, you would just come over here to your layer panel and you can select any kind of layer adjustments, and you can do all the editing you want on this video. You can do this in Photoshop or you can do it in whatever your video editing software is. I usually do that within DaVinci Resolve. So I would, for this video, for example, I would export as is, and then any kind of color grading or anything I wanted to do for it, I would just do that in DaVinci Resolve. So you can do that here. Arguably, you can have a lot more control over what you're able to do here in Photoshop than you do in DaVinci Resolve, but it's already mostly edited. All that really needed is just color grading. So I'm not going to worry about that here. So I'm just going to go to my file. I'm going to hit export, and then we're going to come down here to render video. Okay, then we're going to select our location. So right now I have mine already selected to go to a time-lapses folder on my hard drive, and I'm just going to rename this real quick. VTL, whoops, missed that one, TL. Okay, and then I'm just going to make sure that my size on here is correct as well. So I'm going to come over to size. I'm going to I typed in 3840, and then I'm going to type in 2160. So you can also come down here and just select document size, I guess. That's a quicker way to do it. So, okay, we have everything named. We have our location that we're going to. We have the correct size picked. And then now all we have to do is just hit render. And it'll take a minute to render. It won't take as long as exporting from Lightroom, but it will take a few minutes to actually export and render the video. Okay, so that video is rendered and exported. So we're gonna come down here to our Finder tab, and we're gonna go find that video and see how it looks. Okay, so this looks pretty good. So I don't see any kind of jitteriness in the exposure or anything like that. You know, there's no flashing or anything that's going on in the video. It plays very smooth, looks really good. Like I said, if I were to do any kind of color grading on this now, I would just do it inside of the video software that I'm using. So very easy. Let me know if you have any questions. This is a very simple process, especially in Photoshop. It's so easy. It's just you just need a little bit of patience, just because it kind of takes a little bit of time sometimes. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.